his own law firm. But that's just a testament to the dominion mandate that God has given man. That's just a testament to the dominion mandate. And it's not a one-off scenario. It's not something that can be applicable to just one individual. It's something that every one of us can replicate as well. So do not just leave this conference saying, these guys are at a different level. Or what will it take for me to get to their level? You also can get to their level. Well, I'm going to be talking to you about the process that will take you to get to that level in a different section shortly. So I just want to thank my brother who just left, my big brother, Osito Perugo. You heard from him. I'm not the one that is making this up. If I was to pay him for his services, it's going to cost me $100,000 just to get someone of his caliber to sit down here to speak. But from the very first time I reached out to him and said, Uncle, I have a conference coming up in a way, and I'm personally coming down from the UK for this conference. He said, don't worry about it. As far as it's you, I'm going to be there. And we've had a relationship since I was a child. He's loved me since I was a child, and I truly honor and appreciate that man. And I want to thank my sister, Kelechi. It's been a little bit of back and forth conversations between us both, but eventually, we agreed. And she instantly, the first time I reached out to her, she said, yes, she's going to be there. I don't know why, but she just said, yes, she's going to be there. And I truly honor you. I was truly, truly blessed by your section. Thank you. And to Miss Olivia, thank you so much as well. You stepped in as a last-minute replacement for Mrs. Tessie, but my goodness, what a section. Thank you so much. And you said something that resonated strongly in my spirit. You said, every one of us is a brand, and I'm going to be getting to that shortly. And I just want to also appreciate my brother, Mr. Kinsley, who also stood on this stage to speak. Kinsley, like you heard, is the Director of Operations for Self-Discovery Organization globally. When we started, it was just myself and my wife, and then Kinsley came on board. But today, we have a chapter in Imo State, in Lagos, in Kaduna, in Abuja, where else? In Zimbabwe. We are starting up in Port Harcourt. We are setting up a chapter in Kenya. So currently we have about 7 or 8 chapters, and that's just a testament of God's grace and God's favor. But this gentleman has been instrumental to most of the success of most of the events that we've had, and I truly celebrate you, brother. God bless you. God bless you. And to everyone seated here, there will be no conference without you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Thank you for honoring our invitation. And to our online audience, our family and friends watching from across the globe, from the UK, Canada, I want to truly appreciate you. And I also want to use this opportunity to honor and appreciate especially my wife who is watching online. Thank you for releasing me to be here in person. If you had not been there to look after the kids and keep the home front intact, I wouldn't have been here. So I truly celebrate you. God bless you, ma. So if you follow the trajectory of this conference, you've noticed that we've designed it to center around the different mountains of influence. So you've had a speaker come and talk about media, art and entertainment, where music falls into, business and finance, and all the different mountains. But we intentionally brought in fashion. If you look at the mountains of influence, you wouldn't find fashion as a mountain of influence specifically. But we brought in fashion just to prove a point that beyond being a consumer, you can also create value in yourself, discover that value, refine that value, and deploy that value to serve your generation. You agree with me that the likes of Louis Vuitton, they are brands. Dolce & Gabbana, they are brands. Michael Kors, they are brands. But these are names that started with individuals. These are brands that were bettered by individuals. So if they can also do that, it means that every one of us can also rise to the occasion. Everything I'm putting on here was sourced and styled by our state chapter leader here in Ori. I told him I'm just coming with my box. You're going to provide my shoes. You're going to provide my suit and everything I'm putting on. So I came, with just a little box that I brought back home from the UK. He's sourced for everything I'm putting on, and it's also his own brand. So if he can also do that, it means every single one of us can also define, discover our values, refine it, and deploy it as well. But that's not where I'm headed today. I want to quickly address the mountain of leadership and politics. Mountain of leadership and politics. That's and I've titled it, Why Good People Must Engage in Politics. Now, for many of us, especially young people, politics is something we tend to shy away from. When we hear about politics, the thing that comes to our mind is politics is a dirty game. I'm not interested in politics. So many of us who prefer to observe from a distance, criticize, say everything that is wrong with the government, but when it comes to active participation, we all shy away. But that shouldn't be the case. That shouldn't be the case. And I love the statement by this gentleman, Edmund Burke. he made a statement that I love so much. He said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Now, when I looked at that statement, I came up with my own version of that statement. And I said, evil thrives in politics and leadership because good people leave spaces vacant. I'm going to say that again. Evil thrives in politics and leadership because good people leave spaces vacant. Now, we must understand that there are no vacuums in life. That's why Jesus was citing a parable, and he said that when an unclean spirit finds a vessel that is empty, he goes out and he brings 7 more spirits, more wicked than itself, to occupy that vacuum. Why? Because there are no vacuums in life. So you cannot abandon the political space, or we cannot abandon the political space as believers and expect positive transformation in our generation. It's not possible. It doesn't work that way. So I'm here to talk to us about why good people must engage in politics. And I want to cite an inference from a man we all know in the Bible, the man Daniel. Now, when we hear Daniel, what comes to our mind quickly is the story of the lion's den, right? But we seldom talk about the circumstances that led to him being in the lion's den in the first place. Now, if you agree with me that if there were competent, credible people in government at that point in time, Daniel would not have found himself in the lion's den. Do you know why? Because when they come up to pass that bill that nobody should pray to any other person but the king for a period of 30, 40 days, there will be someone in parliament or a group of people in parliament that will arise and say, you know what? This law is immoral. This law is unjust. We cannot be here and watch this happen. But because Daniel was the only one in politics, in parliament, the Babylonian parliament at that point in time, they were able to pass that law, and he found himself in the lion's den. I want to show you something that very few people, hardly find in the Bible. I was doing a bit of in-depth research, and I started looking, I started checking. I was asking myself, why was Daniel the only one in government? And I began to research. In the book of Daniel will not show you the answer to this. But if you go deep into the book of Jeremiah, if you go to the book of Jeremiah chapter 52, if you begin to read from verse 28 to 30, you see an extensive, in-depth explanation of how these things happen. The Bible made us understand there that wave after wave of Judah's people were carried into Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar. Now I'm going to cite it for you so that you guys see what I'm starting to say. So in Nebuchadnezzar's 7th year, there were 3,023 people taken into captivity in Babylon. And in his 18th year, 832 people were taken. And in his 23rd year, another 745 people were taken into captivity. So altogether, when you sum that together, that's about 4,600 people that were taken from Judah into Babylon that found themselves in the same time frame that Daniel was in Babylon. So my question is, why did we have 4,600 people from the same heritage as Daniel in Babylon, and only one man distinguished himself so much to the extent that he became relevant in government and leadership? And that's the question each and every one of us should ask ourselves as well. Why did we have only one man out of 4,600 people in Babylon at that point in time? Why did we have only one man relevant in politics and government? That's the question we must reflect on. And if you bring it to our day and age, it's like what we call the Japa wave in our society. So you say, like in 2015, a number of people japaed to the UK. Maybe fast forward to about 2020, another set of people japaed to the UK. 2026, another set of people japaed to the UK. So that's how that wave was at that point in time. Nebuchadnezzar will go to Judah, he'll take some people. He'll go after a few years, he'll go and take some more people. He'll go after a few years and take some more people. But all of those people, the common denominator amongst all of them is that they found themselves in Babylon at that point in time. So it's like all of us come to the UK in the same period under the same monarchy rule of Prince Charles, and just one set of individuals decide to go into the political space. But then we end up complaining, oh, they're targeting immigrants, But why haven't you positioned yourself to get into government so you can lend your voice? Why haven't you positioned yourself? So if you're not going to actively participate in politics, you don't have any right to complain about what's going on in politics. And that's the point I want to leave with us here today. I said here, Daniel's greatest challenge was not the presence of wicked men. His greatest challenge was the absence of righteous men. And that is the danger of political vacuums. When good people abandon governance governance does not just disappear. Other people simply take over. And I wrote here, when principled people withdraw, unprincipled people advance. When righteous people refuse responsibility, unrighteous people assume responsibility, and society suffers the consequences. Society suffers the consequences. And this is a take note, a point I want you to note. I said here, leadership and governance matter so much because the laws passed today will shape the society our children will inherit tomorrow. The laws passed today will shape the society our children will inherit tomorrow. And I said here, for someone you may say, oh, politics is not my thing. I just want to focus on business. That's wonderful. Like my sister is doing so well in the business world. But I wrote here, so what if, I just want to cite a scenario. What if you become so successful in business, and let's say you have a number of shops in Douglas and maybe another set of shops in Wedra, and maybe the government of the day comes tomorrow and say, you know what, I want us to pass a law in the State House of Assembly that we're going to demolish all shops in Wedra and all shops in Douglas because we want to expand the road. You did not care about politics, but politics participated in your life. So they're going to demolish your building, and in as much as you say, politics is not my thing, because you did not position yourself to be there in the State House of Assembly, to become part of the policymakers, or at least know people that are part of the policymakers, or at least become a registered member of a political party so that you can actively know what is going on behind the scenes. But if you do not participate in politics, you have no right to complain about what's going on. Now, someone may look at me and say, oh, he's speaking to us about politics, but he lives in the UK. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, let me bring it home. In 2023, my mom knows this, my brother knows this. I live in a constituency that is 97% white people, all right? But before then, in 2018, when I went to the UK, the first thing I did was to register in a political party. The Conservative Party was the leading party at that point in time, right? And by the reason of my membership, I will attend party conferences. I will network I've met with 3 different prime ministers. I've met with members of parliament because I positioned myself to be a part of the party. Now, other immigrants, black people like myself, why they were focusing on economic survival, picking up shifts. I'm not saying any of those things are wrong. But then, when you focus so much on economic survival, and then you come back tomorrow to complain that they're passing laws and making bills that are affecting you, how do you correlate the two? Currently now, there's a bill that's being considered in the House of Parliament about changing the time frame for the independent leave to remain, what we call ILR, from 5 years to 10 years. So what that means is that the amount of time it's supposed to take you to obtain your permanent residency to get British citizenship is going to increase from 5 to 10 if that bill passes into law. But what has immigrants like myself done? What they do is complain, they're targeting us, they're targeting immigrants. But when I preach to them, you need to join a political party, you need to register in a political party. Everybody says, no, politics is none of my business. I'll go to party conferences in Cheshire where I live, and I'll be the only black man in a hall of about 500 and something white people. How then can you lend your voice when these people are moving laws or saying things that affect you as an immigrant? So you see, these are the issues. This is why we must not ignore politics. And for the first time in 2023, I stood for council elections. I went through the nomination, the screening amongst other white people, and I was selected to be the council candidate. And I ran for council election, like I said, in a 97% white constituency. And I lost to an incumbent, even though it was narrowly by about 200 and something votes. But what that did is that it gave me influence. Remember, we were talking about potential to influence. It gave me influence among the locals. Now I can easily come to someone's door and knock and say, my name is Uchenna John. I'm just here to talk about local issues that are affecting our community. What are the things you'd like to share with me? The person shares with me and I forward it to the relevant authority. Now, when I attend meetings, they look at me from the lens of that guy that stood for elections. So I'm not just a normal, common immigrant in the UK. Whenever we have party conferences, I'm there. As a matter of fact, there was one time I was in a different city, and the immediate past Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, wanted to come to my town. My member of parliament called me and said, look, Rishi is coming to Macclesfield. Wherever you are, I need you to come back because I want you to be part of that meeting. And this was a closed meeting that was only a handful of people that were selected to be there. So that's what it means to move from potential to influence, positioning yourself, knocking on doors, becoming relevant in your generation. And it starts by finding an area and becoming influential in that area. So I want to backtrack, say something here. I said here, politics affects business, politics affects education, politics affects healthcare, Politics affects infrastructure. Politics affects the security of life and property. Politics, in a nutshell, affects every aspect of society. And I wrote here, at some point, good people must move from criticism to participation. At some point, good people must move from observation to engagement. At some point, good people must move from discussing policy to helping shape policy. And in order to buttress this point, I want to cite an example. I don't know if you guys have heard about the man, William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce was a British politician in the House of Parliament at that time. William Wilberforce was the first person to actively canvass against slave trade in the UK. So every day he comes to the House of Commons, he kept on debating, passing laws, passing bills. Look, this thing is not right, and he kept on pushing until eventually the slave trade was abolished in the UK. Imagine if there was no good person like William Wilberforce at that point in time positioned. Maybe when I'm moving to the UK, I'll probably be working in one plantation or working in one mine or anything. But because a man like Wilberforce positioned himself and said, you know what, this slave trade thing, we have to stop it. And today, we do not have slave trade in the UK and across the world because a man was rightly positioned in politics. And that's why good people must position themselves in politics. So it's not just something that is applicable in the British context. It's also applicable in the society we find ourselves. And I want to also share another example before I round up this section. You've heard about Martin Luther King as well, the guy that says, I have a dream. Back in the days, in a city called Alabama, black people were not allowed to participate in the voting process. No matter how intellectual you are, no matter how smart, no matter how highly placed you are, so long as you're black, your pigmentation automatically disqualifies you. You're not going to vote. But Martin Luther King kept on leading peaceful protests, advocacy, and things like that, until eventually they signed what we call the Voting Acts Right of 1965. And today, black people can participate in the voting process. But imagine if he had kept quiet and said, no, it's none of my business. Politics is none of my business, like most of us do today. So we've brought in this leadership and politics section, amongst other sections here, just to stir someone up. There might be someone in this room here that's been considering going into politics, venturing into politics, but maybe he's been dissuaded or she has been dissuaded by negative comment in the society that politics is dirty, politics is evil, you cannot go into politics. I'm here to tell you that politics is not dirty, politics is not evil. Politics is only dirty and evil because good people abstain from the system. Good people abstain from the system, and that's why politics is considered dirty. And remember when I was talking earlier, I cited the example of Daniel. How can 4,600 people find themselves in Babylon at that point in time and only one man who positioned himself to be relevant in politics? If there were other people of like mind there, but Daniel would not have found himself in the lion's den. But I love the man Daniel. He did not just serve under the dispensation of one king. He served under several kings. He served under Nebuchadnezzar. He served under Cyrus. He served under Darius. He served under Belshazzar. About 4 to 6 kings Daniel served. He positioned himself for that. It was not handed over to him. It was not given to him as a la carte. He rightly positioned himself. From the beginning, the Bible says that Daniel proposed in his heart that he will not defile himself with the king's food. And he positioned himself. He discovered value in himself. He kept on praying. He kept on following the path that he believed in. And eventually, he got that level of relevance. So we can also do it in our generation. These stories we read in the Bible are not just for the biblical age. We can also replicate them in our generation. Somebody here can become a parliamentarian. Someone here can decide to go into the State House for Assembly. I celebrate our commissioner here who is here. Thank you so much for all that you do. Someone else can become a commissioner. Someone else can be a senator. Someone from this room can become a governor. So do not just believe that lie or that mentality that politics is evil. When you leave this conference, have that mentality, have that paradigm shift that, look, I need to participate in the political process. And it starts easy. It's as simple as getting your permanent voters cards, registering to vote. It's as simple as joining the political party. Even if you don't want to put yourselves forward to vote, or to contest rather, you can be part of they have these delegates that appoint, people, candidates. You have delegates that appoint candidates. You can be part of the delegates and start from there and then build yourself and keep building yourself, So I want us to just have that shift in mentality that politics is not evil. Politics is only evil because good people abstain from politics. And I'm just going to wrap up this section because I want to go into my main keynote speech. Thank you so much for listening.